Artificial intelligence is the stuff of Hollywood blockbusters. The first robot on film was in 1927, the film Metropolis. In the 1968 movie 2001, A Space Odyssey, the computer HAL became ambitious and plotted mass murder. And Ava in Ex Machina looks and sounds and manipulates others just like a human being. AI is part of our lives now. Siri on your phone and Alexa in your kitchen are examples. Last November, a program called ChatGPT was released, attracting 1 million users within 5 days. It performs natural language tasks. That is, it can write like you and I. We can show you. Earlier, I asked it to write a paragraph about me that I could use on a website. We type in the task, and up come the results. I can forgive it for being slightly out of date. It has a biography of me which does not include the fact that I now do Sunday with Michael Portillo on GBNews. But there is broad concern that ChatGPT could be used by students to write essays, or indeed to replace the GBNews producers who wrote this introduction. Elon Musk, who is an investor in the company, has said it's a good thing. But Ofqual, the exam watchdog for England, is worried about pupils cheating on coursework with the chatbots. And those who make their living with words are now quaking for their jobs. Stephen Hawking said AI is likely to be either the best or the worst thing ever to happen to humanity, so there's a huge value in getting it right. What are the ethics of using AI? Dr. Piers Benn is a British philosopher and author, and Dr. Henry Shevlin is Senior Research Associate at the Leverhulme Centre for the Future of Intelligence, specialising in ethics and AI. Very good to see you both. Piers, first of all, what strikes you as being the broad ethical and philosophical issues that are raised by machines doing what humans used to do increasingly?
Well, the question for me with respect to this particular technology is whether there's any new ethical question that's been raised by it.
Yes.
I mean, clearly there are questions about, whether it's good for us to have things done for us that we, by robots, for example, or having medical diagnoses done for us. There are questions about the likely accuracy of it, but those questions also arise with all kinds of things we take for granted, all kinds of technology we take for granted. There are also, of course, ethical questions you just referred to about plagiarism and originality and so on, but those aren't new questions. Plagiarism has always been a potential problem with students. Want their essays done with minimal student input. So I suppose I'm interested in the question of whether anything new is fixed by this. Philosophical questions, I think, are more intriguing in some ways. I mean, what it really raises is the old question of what humans are. I mean, there's an old question in philosophy, which is, might computers simulate human intelligence, or might they even be intelligent or sentient? Could machines think? Of course, that raises the question of, are we machines, a particular sophisticated kind of machine? And you can certainly argue that there's something about the human brain that we don't understand, but it somehow makes us capable of thought, cognition, desire, moral values, all these things. If these things could be simulated or created by artificial devices, then in a way they'd be like us. But then, of course, there'd be moral questions like, would they have rights and responsibilities? Could we have relationships with them? Could you marry a robot, for example? Could you date an AI? Yeah, but also, so those are some of the philosophical questions.
Yes. So you say that no important new issues are raised by this particular technology. But I suppose on your second point, that each time we make an advance, we are chipping away at that question of whether there is a difference between a machine and a human being.
Yes.
But do you feel there's an absolutely clear answer that there is such a difference? And can you put your finger on what it is?
I don't think there's a clear answer in principle, because I don't see any principled reason why AI devices or other machines should not simulate and eventually possess something like human reason. The question for me is empirical. It strikes me as quite unlikely that anything has been devised that actually approaches that. So it strikes me as very unlikely that the GPT thing understands anything. It can digest a whole load of things written on the internet, answer to all sorts of questions, including about your biography, omitting the very facts about you, like you being on GBNews. But it might get things roughly right. It knows which constituency you represent when you're MP. So you type in Michael Portillo, all this stuff comes up. But so it would on Wikipedia too.
Yeah.
It doesn't understand anything. And it could in principle, but I doubt that it does.
Yes, well, let's ask Henry that. Presumably you understand how this technology works. I understand that, in a way, it's an extension of what I want to say, predictive text.
Yes, I think that's exactly right. So these current wave of models, GPT-2, GPT-3, Google has its own models called Lambda and Palm. Essentially what they are is huge statistical models of the way the English language works, and not just the English language, trained on vast amounts of data, almost the entirety of the internet at this point. And their main function is just to predict which sequence of words comes next. And I think early on, people looked at these systems as potentially aids to writing, but it turns out if you give these systems the capacity to predict what sequence of words comes next, they can do a lot of elaborate compositions of their own, including things like summarizing articles or writing poetry or even writing code.
Yes, and are you quite impressed by these efforts, technically speaking?
I'm incredibly impressed. I've been trying to sound the alarm bells about this field and getting very excited about it as well for the last 2 or 3 years. And I think ChatGPT is very much an implementation of these things we already had, and one that's made a splash because it's been available to the general public. It is just an iterative improvement on things we already had, however. OpenAI is set to release GPT-4 sometime this year, which is likely to be another qualitative leap in performance.
You said it rang alarm bells, and you also want to celebrate it. So take us through those two categories. What should we celebrate first?
So there are all sorts of tasks where I think we would benefit from greater assistance that currently have to be done by humans. So some simple examples of this are routine therapy, just sort of simple talk-through sessions with therapists. Or education is another one. Imagine if everyone could have their own private tutor next time a child is struggling with their physics homework, having an AI tutor bot to talk them through the problems. These are fairly obvious and really powerful positive applications. Moving into the sort of murkier negative side, or potentially negative side, it's easy to have pleasurable conversations with these systems. Another AI system that's freely available online is Conversation AI, developed by a former team from Google, that allows you to chat to historical figures, from Alexander the Great to Charles Dickens. And it's easy to find yourself being sucked into these conversations and treating these systems as though they're real humans. Now, that's a lovely way to spend an hour or two, but I think
if you've got a shortage of real human beings in your life, which many people do, there are many lonely people, are there dangers for lonely people, or is it just a good thing?
I think it could go either way. So one worry that people have is the concept of de-skilling, and this is something we see in aviation, for example, worries about pilots becoming too reliant on autopilots and forgetting some basics of how to fly. And I think we could see something similar socially, social de-skilling. If people become too reliant on interacting with these very charming and complimentary chatbots that never put up much resistance, they might forget how to interact with real human beings. On the other hand, as you say, there are lots of lonely people in the world, people who, for whatever reason, find it hard to find those to talk to. And you could even see these systems serving constructively as a sort of on-ramp to social skills for these people. So it is very much a double-edged sword, as is often the case in AI applications.
Piers, when you hear about the possibility of a bot talking to a child, taking a child maybe who's struggling with lessons back through the stuff until the child has learnt it better, does that give you any worries? Should the child react to that machine just the same way that it would to a human teacher?
Well, it doesn't give any worries per se, but there are wider worries. I mean, I recall when I was at school in the 70s, I mean, electronic calculators were coming in, and people sometimes said then, oh, people won't do mental arithmetic anymore. That's not really controversial now. They're tremendously useful, and they're just taken for granted. And this technology has been around for a very long time. What I think the deeper currents of the dispute are about the kind of things that we believe we are and the kind of things that we think that computers or AI systems are. I mean, the concept might be open-ended, self-conscious flexibility. That's what we want. So autopilots, which are very useful in aviation and probably much better than ordinary pilots 99.9% of the time at avoiding crashes, may make fatal errors because they don't have the open-ended flexibility that we think we do. Maybe we don't, of course, but I think we probably do. When it comes to what it is to be a human being or a person, there's a great emphasis on cognition in all we've been talking about, and I've been very interested to hear what Henry said. But there's a strong argument for thinking that human beings are holistic systems that involve desires, motivations, values, self-conscious reflection, that make the human race what it is, the ability to build civilizations, customs, languages, institutions, religions, art, science. Now, as things are, AI systems, it seems to me, lack those things, and I don't think they'll ever acquire them. But I'm open-minded. They could acquire those things, but in that case, they're persons like us, and then we have to react to them as persons.
So on this question, for example, of moral judgment, do you think we can program machines to make moral judgments, which are generally moral judgments? Can we close this gap between machine and a human being that Piers is talking about?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting question. And one, of course, we have had to confront in some small ways already. A lot of systems that we use make decisions in their own right, and those systems often have moral dimensions. But, of course, as you're moving towards fully autonomous agent-like AI, whether it's the driverless car deciding whether to swerve to save a pedestrian's life, we have to take these social rules that we are brought up with and are often implicit, intuitive for us, and actually explicitly build them into machines, which is obviously part of the reason philosophers are so central to this enterprise.
And, of course, those rules may be very different in different sorts of society. I mean, those rules would be different in China or Iran to what they are in Britain. Can I ask you what may seem like a very pedestrian question, given the heights at which we've been talking? For centuries, we've been warned that machines are going to replace human beings and human beings won't be left with anything to do. Century after century, that has proved not to be the case because new work has arisen that we didn't foresee. Do you think that is going to happen again, or do you think now really we're in the position where human beings are not going to find paid work to do?
I think it will happen again because, as you say, humans are very creative and ambitious creatures, and we always find new things to do. So the more we get machines to do, the more we'll devise things for them to do. So take medical diagnosis. Machines, I think, might be very good at medical diagnoses, but then we'll just want more things diagnosed. We'll discover more problems in the human condition and the human psyche that we want more sophisticated robots to do. So my feeling is it's just like a Parkinson's law thing, and I mean, things to do will just expand to fill the possibilities available. But I don't know. It's a fascinating question.
Henry, there's a whole room of people out there in front of their computers writing introductions for TV presenters. Yep. Are they going to be put out of work? And if they are, will there be something else for them to do?
Well, I'm already seeing ways in which people, friends are using things like ChatGPT to reduce the number of hours they have to work per week to put together blog posts. So I think it would be foolhardy to say that there are going to be no job losses due to these systems. But this is the way...
There will be job changes, for sure.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think a lot of the changes that we're seeing, for example, in AI-generated art involve artists using these systems themselves to increase their productivity, to produce new systems. But I think whilst I do share Piers's generally positive view of the way these systems create jobs in their own right, there are, of course, going to be losers, and I think that should prompt a societal reflection on either how to compensate or how people retrain insofar as those jobs are threatened.
Well, I think that's one of the most interesting questions of our day. Many thanks to Dr. Henry Shevlin and Dr. Piers Benn.
Thank you.